Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, a mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in. Welcome in, podcast listeners, to another episode of Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm excited to be here with you again for another episode, and I have a feeling that today's episode is going to be one of my most listened to episodes. And the reason why is because a couple years back, I made a Facebook video that was of me talking to my then 12-year-old son about sex and consent and masturbation and all those kinds of things. And woo-wee, I'm pretty sure that video has gotten at least 10 times more views than any other thing that I've ever met. And that is what we're talking about today in the podcast. We are talking about sex with our kids. How do we talk about sex? And of course, it's like impossible to bring this topic up without thinking of that. I think it was Salt and Pepper song. Let's talk about sex, baby. Right? That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about sex. We're talking about sex. And I'll start us off with a confession, which is when my eldest son, by the way, I always like to tell everybody, I kind of every couple episodes, I feel like I need to reiterate, like the stuff that I share about my kids, I have their permission to share, just so you know. Because I'm about to share some real stuff about some sex with that was going on with my kids. So I want everyone to know that I'm sharing with permission. So my oldest son, obviously, never had a kid who was sexually active before because he's my oldest or whatever. When he decided to lose his virginity, I handled it so poorly. So I'm going to tell you. So Elijah, as we all know, had a hard time freshman year of high school, blah, blah, blah. You guys all have heard this a million times before. But also, he's just a typical 14, 15-year-old kid, 15, not 14. And he was interested in girls. Surprise, surprise. Not necessarily he's interested in girls, but he was interested in partnership, sexuality, interacting with other people his own age in a sexual way. And for him, that was girls. And I felt like we had really run a really sex positive home all along. Like we've never been shy about talking about sex. We've never been shy about bodies. We have done all the things that you're quote unquote supposed to do in terms of like body positivity, body neutrality, talking about consent, talking about sex as like not this taboo thing or something that you can't do until you're married or anything like that. I feel like we pretty actually hit the nail on the head in the sex department talking with our kids. And one of the things we'd always told our kids was sex is something you do with someone you love when your head, your heart, and your body are all ready. And if you have sex when all three of those things are not ready, it can be something that you might wish you hadn't done, or it might not be a really positive experience for you. If you have sex before your body's ready, obviously. If you have sex before your head is ready, obviously. If you have sex before your heart is ready, obviously, it's not going to be a positive experience. And we talked about all that stuff. I mean, as early, like we always were responding to kids' questions about sex as they came up, blah, blah, blah. And honestly, we could have like 16 different podcast episodes about sex. So there's another podcast episode that will come in the future sometime that is about like, how do you talk to little kids about sex and how do you answer their questions about where babies come from and all of that stuff. So I guess I should have prefaced this by saying like, this episode is not about that. This is about like when kids are actually starting to think about having sex or getting sexually active in some way or being intimate with another person and all of that stuff. So anyway, this is the stage that we had set within our family before our kids even became teenagers. Then fast forward to Elijah is a freshman in high school and he's starting to like go out with girls and things like that. He has a girlfriend. He's, being curious and exploring and all of that stuff. And finally he actually does have sex. He loses his virginity. He's a freshman in high school, which in my mind was like too young. Also, he was going through all this other tumultuous stuff. So in my mind, his head, heart, and body were not ready. Maybe his body was ready, but his head and his heart, I did not think were ready. And he told my husband, he told Mike that he had had sex, and Mike came upstairs and was like, "Guess what? Your son lost his virginity today." And I lost my ever loving mind. First, I lost my mind on Mike. I was like, that's how you're going to tell me? Like, you think I'm not going to care, or it's like not going to be a big deal? You just like drop that like bombshell on me, like while I'm in the middle of putting our like 7-year-old to bed, or, whatever I was doing at the time. And like, it's just like a casual thing, like your son got an A on his homework assignment, and so I was super furious at Mike because I thought he was really being insensitive. I mean, obviously, in retrospect, I was furious at Mike because I was just really wigged out and he happened to be in my sights, in my crosshairs. But then I got really upset with Elijah. And now I did not yell at him. So I will give myself some credit that I took out all my yelling on Mike and not on our son. Well, when I talked to Elijah, I was like, I think you've made a really big mistake. Like, you're too young. This was too soon. And this person you haven't been with for very long. And I did all the wrong things, you guys. So everything I'm telling you to do, please do not do this. Like, I shamed him. I was like, I'm very disappointed in you. This was a big mistake. I thought we taught you, this whole head, heart, and body thing, but you're obviously not even caring. You just made this impulsive decision and, whatever. I don't even remember all the things I said to him, but I probably, if I did remember them, I would just be a puddle of shame and self-flagellation right now. It was not good. Luckily for us, I think we had done a good job up until then of giving him the right messages about himself, his body, his own autonomy, who the boss of his body is. Spoiler alert, it's not me. And so he kind of came back to me and Mike and was like, "Oh, okay, forgot to tell you one of the most important things." Then I was like, "You know what? We can't control what you do with your body. If you're going to have sex, I think it's a bad decision, but you get to," I did kind of like passive aggressively say, "You're the boss of your body. So I guess you're going to be an idiot with it," or whatever. But, you're not going to be allowed to be in your room alone with a girl, and you have to have your door open at all times, and you can't have a girl here when there's no adults around. Like all the classic like parenting rules that we probably remember from when we were kids about having your like girlfriend, boyfriend, partner over and how that has to go down. And he was like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like trying to put all this smack down on him about like basically like, if you're going to have sex, I can't stop you, but I'm sure as shit not going to make it easy for you to do it because I think you're making a huge mistake. And the next day he came to me and Mike, he came back at us, like I said, and he said, "I just really don't understand these rules. Like, you always told me that when your head, your heart, and your body are ready, that's when you might choose to have sex. Well, I think my head, my heart, and my body are ready. And I'm extremely respectful of this girl. We're in a committed relationship. I have her consent. She wants to participate in this activity too. Like, what am I doing wrong? Like, why are you putting all these rules on me?" And I just sat there with this like pit in my stomach because I knew, like, in my heart of hearts, I was like, "Motherfucker, he's right. Shit." Like, I spent this whole time thinking like, "Oh, head, heart, body. I've got it on lock. I know exactly what to say to kids." I forgot the part where I'm not the one who decides if his head, heart, and body are ready. Like, he picks. He decides that. And he could be wrong. Like, he could make a mistake. He could think he's ready and be wrong about that. And he could, think he picked the right person and be wrong about that. And I don't have any place there. And it was like, dude, such a sucker punch. I was so, ugh. I literally just, I out loud, I said, "Well, shit." And I was like, I got to think about this for a while. You're making some really good points, fair, very fair, all the stuff you're saying. And I came back to him a couple days later. I'm like, "You know what? You're right. Like, if my job is to support you and making your own choices with your body and owning your body and being in the driver's seat about your sexuality, like I really am being a complete hypocrite by trying to control your ability to do what you want to with your body through all of these rules that I just like pulled out of my ass, basically. And we like that is probably one of the most clear examples of me and Mike doing like a complete about face in our parenting within a matter of days. And since then, we've had a completely opposite policy around sexuality and sex with our kids than honestly anybody I know. Like I have yet to meet another parent. And if you're out there listening to this, introduce yourself to me because I want to know you. I want a friend. But we have a very different policy about sex. Like I think the most common policies out there in parenthood vary from you just can't do it, like no, basically, to I just don't want to know about it. So, like, keep it a secret, or I'm going to try to make it hard for you to have sex, but I know that you probably will figure out a way to do it anyway. Like, I'm just going to put my head in the sand around it. But zero parents that I've met so far, anyway, have a really open dialogue with their children around their sex lives that has nothing to do with an agenda and everything to do with supporting and facilitating their children in their journey with sexuality. So that's my confession. Clear segue into what we're talking about today. I want you to think about what is your policy around sex? And does your policy around sex align with your true, authentic self and values? Or is your policy around sex dictated or influenced by your fears, your ego, the discomfort you might feel with thinking about and seeing your child as a sexual creature? It's a big question. Just let it sit in, really think about it. And then this episode is going to be all about, all right, what is the policy around sex and why? And not to say that everyone has to do it the same way that I do, because you absolutely do not, but I will share kind of our policy about around sex and why we have that policy. And even though I say like everyone gets to do it their own way, which you absolutely do, I have yet to find a restrictive policy around sex that matches up with people's core values and not being influenced by fears and discomfort. So let that ruminate as we kind of go through this and talk about what's the policy. So, what do we do in our family when our kids are thinking about having sex? We talk to them about it. We talk to them about it with no agenda, and we ask great questions that help them think about it. If they ask for our advice or are curious what we think, we tell them. And that's it. And I can tell you that it is a little bit uncomfortable. And I will also tell you, like, full disclosure, like, right now I have a 18-year-old son, a 16-year-old son who's going to be 17 like any minute, and a 14-year-old daughter, and then a 9-year-old. He's not a part of this conversation. Thank goodness. Well, I will tell you, following and practicing what I preach with my older two sons was a lot easier. Like now we're dealing with our daughter and she has a boyfriend, and I refuse to, be a hypocrite. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And that means that I will support and talk to my daughter and help her figure out for herself if and when she feels ready. And I will, be alongside her psychologically, not actually, as she makes her decision. But I will admit it is different. And I wish that it weren't different. I think it speaks a lot to like just all the gender stereotypes and norms and all of that stuff that I wish weren't real. And I definitely wish weren't real in me, but they are. And so it is harder a little bit for sure. And we'll find out. We'll find out how it feels when She actually makes that decision. But I really want to encourage you to just think through, like, what is your policy around sex and why? So for us, our policy around sex is you're the boss of your body. And why is that our policy? Because our policy around everything since our kids have entered this earthly domain has been you're the boss of your body. And I really can't figure out a way for me to walk that talk and try to control and to make decisions for my children around sex for them. Those two things just don't fit for me. And I refuse to be either a hypocrite or violate my own values or be less than my kids deserve me to be around sex, even if it makes me feel super uncomfortable, even if I feel that they're making bad decisions, even if I know, because let's be honest, as parents, like we know there's so many times where we know that they're making a bad decision. It's not like, oh, I think they're making a bad decision. It's like, I'm not an idiot. I can tell this is a mistake that my child is making. Like that's the thing. If you listen to that whole gold standard episode a while back, you heard me say like the gold standard doesn't change just because something is harder. We still have to do the gold standard. It's just harder to do the gold standard. And we need more resources and more help and more support and more clarity and more self care and more doing our own self work to give our kids the gold standard. The gold standard doesn't change. And if the gold standard is support, not solve, authoritative parenting, if the gold standard is being my kids' helpmeet, if the gold standard is they're the boss of their bodies, like that doesn't change just because now you're the boss of your body means you're having sex versus when you were 10, you're the boss of your body meant you got to pick what you wore to school. You're the boss of your body is you're the boss of your body. And damn, that can be uncomfortable, but that's kind of the whole reason why I have a job. It's because, like, as parents, our discomfort is our job. So we crazily and weirdly had this conversation with our kids and then found ourselves in the situation of having conversations with them instead about like how you can't have sex or you're not allowed to have a girl in the house or you're not allowed to be in a room with the door closed or blah, blah, blah. Now we were having conversations about like how to be a good housemate. Like no one wants to hear you. No one wants to see your, evidence. Nobody wants to like be privy to your private stuff. It's private. So just like be cool, man. The same as you would be having a conversation in college with one of your roommates. Like, dude, I don't want to walk in on you and your partner. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to hear it happening. Like all that stuff. Like, be cool, dude. And, Mike and I had so many moments where we're just kind of looking at ourselves like, is this actually happening? Is this really right? But once again, like for us, we could not find a way to be with our children around sex that felt um any more like authentic, aligned, genuine, integrous, is that a word? With integrity than what we were doing. And so we kind of just like held hands and jumped off a cliff together as parents of like, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And that probably means our kids are going to have sex before we want them to. It probably means that they're going to get their heart stomped on. It probably means that they're going to have a lot of like experiences that will be kind of daunting to them and maybe even freak them out. And I can tell you from experience now that we've gone through this together, like, yes, 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 and yes, like all of those things happened. And that's our kids' journey to experience. It's their journey to experience what happens when you have sex when it really wasn't a great idea to have sex. What happens when you have sex and you aren't being super careful? What happens when you have sex and you ignored all these warning signs? And now the cool thing, the most amazing thing about choosing to parent our kids around sex this way is we are so in on the conversation. I have had conversations with my kids that you probably would either cringe or like hide your head under a pillow or just not even believe that a kid and a parent would talk to each other about this stuff. But everything from like do guys like it if you have pubic hair to, you know, what should I do? I was with my girlfriend and her mom walked in. Or, we had sex. My girlfriend is on on birth control and I know for sure that she's faithful. Ha ha. Sounds like an after school special. We had sex without a condom and now I'm freaking out because, like, what if that was a big mistake? And I can be in that conversation and be like, yeah, that sounds like really understandable that you would be worried that you made a big mistake. Like, what makes you think it might have been a mistake? Well, what if she isn't really faithful, but I just thought she was? You know, what if something happened to her and that she doesn't feel comfortable telling me? What if? And what if the birth control doesn't work, right? And I can just sit there and say, yeah, those are all really valid concerns. What do you think you're going to do next time that you have the opportunity to have sex with her? He's like, I think I'm going to use a condom. I'm like, smart choice, son. These conversations that we all as parents want to be a part of, even though we don't want to be a part of them because they're icky or maybe are uncomfortable. But like, how many mistakes do kids make? And because they don't feel like they can talk to anyone about it, we find out later. And how many times, how many parents out there have been in this situation of saying, like, God, I wish you would have just come to me. I would have told you. Or, God, why didn't you ask me? I would have told you the truth. Like, we get to be that person that our kids come to because they know that we're not going to try to control them or judge them or shame them or muddy the waters for them while they're making the really, really big decision in their lives. And I can tell you right now, for anyone out there who's thinking, well, like once you aren't like trying to stop them from doing it, they're just going to go out and do it. Guess what? Probably know what I'm going to say. First of all, they're going to do it anyway. Kids are not going to wait until their head, their hearts, and their body are actually ready because kids think their heads, hearts, and bodies are ready way sooner than they actually are. Like, listen, if I look back on my life, when was my head, heart, and body actually ready to have sex? Probably in my like 20s. But did I wait until I was 20 to have sex? No, I did not. And most people don't. So your choices aren't stop them from doing it or not stop them from doing it. Your choices are like they're going to do it. Do you get to be the safe person for them or not? And that's entirely in your control. You get to decide if you show up with your kid as a safe person. And you get to decide what you say when they come to you and say, like, I had sex without a condom. Like, what was I doing internally? Like, are you freaking kidding me? Are you an idiot? Did not say any of those things, right? Because that's not my role. And it feels like it is to us parents, doesn't it? And it really, really isn't. And one of the great things about working with me, I think, I have this workbook that all my clients get when they work with me. And everything in the workbook has a video that goes with it. And I'm really, really proud of the course that I've put together for my clients. It's equal parts parenting skills and mindset work, because if we don't do both of those things, we are not going to be able to parent well. I love everything in that curriculum. One of my very favorite things that I put together in that workbook is an exercise called What is Your Job? And it really walks you through, like, what does it mean to be a good parent? Like, well, if you had to write down like your job description, what would it be? And then we start to like kind of get curious about that and go deep with that. And 99% of people say something in their first crack at what's my job description about, like, I want to raise happy, healthy kids. I want to raise a kid who's a good member of society. I want to raise a kid who's independent and self-sufficient. Guys, every single one of those things is not your decision. Like, you're setting goals for other people. You're deciding that your child is supposed to have a job, be successful, be happy. All of those things are not in your control. So if it's not our place to define what's going to go on for our kids or what their values and goals should be, then what the hell is our job as a parent? And can you come up with a job description that's solely about you? And you can look back at your experience as a parent, and regardless of how your kid is doing or what they're doing, or if you think they're doing a great job or a poor job as an adult or a young person, can you still look back at yourself as a parent and say, I 1,000,000% delivered on my job description? But so many of us have job descriptions that are contingent on our children's outcomes. I can only be a good mom if my kid waits until they're a junior to have sex. I don't know, some arbitrary thing like that. Or if my kid gets in trouble with the law, I must have failed him as a parent. If my kid, has sex their freshman year of high school, I must have screwed up. Well, fuck that shit. That is not real. If your job description, if you can only be good at your job if other people do shit that you can't control, then you have a whacked out job description. And one of my favorite things is helping shepherd parents through, like, okay, let me think about this. And it really takes a while to think about, like, okay, what is a job description that's only about me, even though I'm parenting? And I'm not going to tell you what my job description is right now, because that's a topic for another podcast episode. But you can see how that's so germane to these really tough, tricky situations like sex. Ooh, it's heavy. If anyone out there is like going, hell no, screw you, Anne, I'm never going to do this. Like, I can't handle that. Like, no way. I get it. And I certainly would not have come around to this way of thinking until I was confronted by my extremely wise, emotionally intelligent son, who also, I will pat myself on the back, has been raised in an environment where we encourage him to think for himself and speak for himself and advocate for himself, when he was able to come to me and give me the little wake up call that I really needed. And since then, like, I can tell you, like, our kids are so happy and healthy and connected in their sex lives. And I feel so, so, so proud of that. I hope that's helpful for you all today. I really hope I get a lot of kind of comments, pushback, replies, like whatever words you want to say to this episode, because I can imagine that it is pushing on a lot of sensitive buttons out there. And I think taking this episode in conjunction with some future episodes that are about, like, how do we talk to younger kids about sex and bodies, and how do we help our younger kids develop a strong sense of body autonomy, agency, and consent. Those kind of things juxtaposed with what we're talking about today, I think, are going to give y'all a really comprehensive and hopefully thought-provoking picture of how to parent around sexuality. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you again next week. And if this sounds like, oh my gosh, this is how I want to be with my kids, I'm so envious of this relationship Anne has with her kids, I want to create that too. Like, I want to help you create it. So links to set up a discovery call with me, to get my free workbook, to follow me, to get into my world, are all in the show notes. I highly recommend you checking them out. And if you do nothing else, I really, really encourage you to set up a discovery call for me, because I would love to sit down and hear your story, give you my feedback, and help you decide if you want to start working with me for realsies and take it beyond just these little snippets of ear candy that you get every week. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Have a great rest of your week. Bye, everybody. The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long, or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/KaplanCall, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.